Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk just a couple minutes about managing overseeded Bermuda grass. It's that time of year when most turf care professionals are putting down ryegrass for winter cover and improve turf quality. Most everybody has their ryegrass down by this point, but it's not too late, which we'll talk about a little bit of timing as it relates to putting down ryegrass seed. If I can advance my screen, there it goes. What is overseeding? What we're talking about now is the process of establishing a cool season turf within warm season turf. In this case, we're talking about Bermuda grass. Bermuda grass is by far the most common sports turf that we have here in the Southeast. Some of the advantages of overseeding is going to be improved aesthetics. That's probably the most common reason why you see overseeded turf grass is just for that green color. Bermuda grass, of course, goes dormant here in the Southeast. And so pretty much from December through early April, we're going to have blonde, brown turf, which is fine, but some people don't want to see that. And so that's one of the main reasons for putting out ryegrass. Also improve playing surface once it's established. And so it's going to help reduce some of those low-lying wet areas. It's going to absorb some of that. Bermuda grass that's dormant can get kind of slick, and so it gives more foot traction for those athletes playing on a sport surface. Some of the disadvantages, of course, is going to be cost. You have to purchase the seed. Then you have more cost that goes into it, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. Potential weed issues. Once you put the ryegrass down, it completely changes your herbicide plan. And so you're kind of limited on what you can use. So that can in turn cause some potential weed issues. And then Bermuda grass transition, which is late spring when we start to kill off that ryegrass crop. We want a good, healthy Bermuda turf. And if our overseed is too healthy, it's going to choke out some of our Bermuda. And so we'll talk a little bit also about some Bermuda transition. Right, so establishment, we're talking about perennial ryegrass, not annual ryegrass. Annual ryegrass is more clumpy, doesn't tolerate these low mowing heights, has more of a lime green color. Anytime you're overseeding turf, you want to use perennial ryegrass. Okay, we're going to treat it as an annual crop. But we want that perennial ryegrass for that low mowing height, that turf quality, and that good dark green color. Timing can vary widely depending on when you want your turf to be its best. You can overseed as early as August. Typically for Central Alabama, anytime between September and November is going to be average. So if you want good turf quality, good Bermuda grass, all the way through October, then you can wait till November, mid-November, even up to Thanksgiving, put your ryegrass out. And doing that, it's not going to be as well established, and it's going to be thinner going into the wintertime. But if all you're looking for is turf quality in the fall, and then again in the spring, you don't really care what your winter grass looks like, then yeah, bump that ryegrass back to November. You'll have good quality Bermuda grass. One of the issues with overseeding is you have to irrigate a lot. You have to raise up the mowing height, so you get a lot of leggy ryegrass during establishment. That's not necessarily the best quality. If you're talking something like a golf course, that's not the best turf quality. So by bumping that planting date back, you can have good quality in the fall, and then once it gets established, you'll have good quality ryegrass in the springtime. 400 pounds to the acre is a good starting rate. There's guys who do down to 250, 300 pounds. There's guys who do, 800, 900 pounds to the acre. It really depends on, again, back to that transition. If you do 800 to 900 pounds, you're really going to be choking out that Bermuda grass in the springtime. So if you've done overseeding before, you'll kind of play with that rate, find a good happy medium where you get a good stand of ryegrass, but you're not really choking out your Bermuda grass. If you're, let's say, on a football field and there's literally nobody stepping foot on it during the summertime, you don't really care what it looks like in the summertime, sure, go ahead and put 800 pounds on it. And then you'll have all summer to grow that back in to get ready for the following fall. Vertical mowing or scalping the Bermuda grass prior to seeding will help get you some good seed to soil contact. If the Bermuda is still actively growing, you can use a growth regulator. So if you're going to be putting this ryegrass out, let's say 1st of September here in central Alabama, the Bermuda grass is still actively growing. If you can apply a growth regulator, that's going to slow down the growth of the Bermuda grass, let that ryegrass pop up. And in turn, you're going to have reduced mowing because you've regulated that Bermuda grass. Anytime you seed, you want to try to wait as long as you can before you put a mower back on it. You want to make sure that ryegrass is well established before you try to mow it. And so by applying a growth regulator, you can do that. You can put down the seed with a rotary spreader, an air seeder, some kind of ground-driven equipment, drop spreader, some kind of seed evader that's going to physically break up that soil to where you get good seed to soil contact. No matter what you do, I recommend 2 directions because ultimately that's going to give you the best coverage. If you go just one direction, you're bound to have a skip or overlap somewhere, and it's going to not come out as even. So if you can do 2 directions, that's going to be the best. All right, so after seeding, again, you want to limit mowing and traffic as much as possible. If you're overseeding a football field and it's, here in the middle of football season, you're not really going to be able to eliminate traffic on it. They're going to be playing games on it. But if you can try to find a time where maybe they have 2 or 3 away games in a row, give you a good chance to get that seed established before getting any traffic on it. Raise the mowing height as much as possible, and then reduce that down as you go. Make sure you get your reel sharp. If you're using a reel mower, you want good sharp reels. If that seedling is not established, if it's not rooted down, that reel mower is going to pink, just going to pull that little seedling out of the ground, and it's terminated at that point. Maintain consistent moisture. In the turf world, there's 2 camps of irrigation. You have beans. I'm going to put down 30 minutes of water. I'm going to water every 5 days. Light and infrequent means I may put down 3 or 4 minutes, but I'm going to do it every night. In the case of establishing seed, you want light and frequent. That little seed, his roots are not very deep, so you want to maintain light and frequent irrigation, which can, if you're on a golf course, let's say, and you're irrigating your fairways 3 times a day, like this instance right now, it hasn't rained in 6 or 8 weeks here. But if you're irrigating your fairways 2 or 3, 4 times a day, you're going to have wet fairways. And so telling golfers, hey, it's cart path only because we're irrigating our ryegrass, you're going to get a lot of sideways looks. And so that's just something to think about if you're wanting to overseed your fairways. Some situations may require supplemental seeding. So if you're seeding a football field and you get 3 games in a row, right after that, you're going to tear up a lot of that ryegrass, especially between your hashes. So you may have to come back and do some supplemental seeding. Fertilize according to a soil sample, of course. If you're managing your Bermuda grass like you should, your P, K, micros, they should be all pretty in sync. But you are going to want to apply some supplemental nitrogen, anywhere from a half a pound to a pound per 1,000 square feet. And then you can apply additional nitrogen as you go through the winter and get into the springtime. The last 2 points there, iron and pigment and paint, those are 2 really good tools that every turf manager should have in their back pocket. Iron application for improved color, that goes for ryegrass, Bermuda grass, whatever turf you're really managing. That's a great way to get a green pop without really getting the quick growth. And then application of paint and pigment. If you've got really thin ryegrass, then you can go out, do a light application of some green color, and that's really going to make a difference to fill in those voids of that blonde Bermuda grass. Just a few minutes on weed control. Main thing I'm going to talk about is POA annual, which is annual bluegrass. It's by far the most problematic weed in overseeded turf, and that's because anything that's going to control POA is going to also control your ryegrass. There's very few products that we have that can take POA out of ryegrass. There are a few, but they're very temperature dependent, time dependent. And so it's hard to rely just on those, especially with all the resistance issues that we have. There are some pre-emergents. It's got barricade curbs, thymosine, dimension. There's a few more, but those are probably the most common. So you're going to want to put those out according to the label. They'll have, a 6 or 8 week pre-plant interval. So if you're planting mid-September, you're literally putting this stuff out in July. Not many people are thinking about POA in July, but that's what you have to do if you're wanting to put down a pre-emergent. If you're going to wait and put down your ryegrass at a later date, let's say, mid-November, then by that time, especially if it's cooler, a lot of POA has already germinated. And so you can use some of these post-emergent herbicides that don't have any pre-emergent activities, go through, do a kill, let's say revolver, transit, and then come back a few days later and put your ryegrass down. Even glyphosate, glufosinate, those are going to be non-selective. If you have a little bit of green Bermudagrass, it's going to go ahead and put it into that dormant state and may delay green up a little bit in the springtime, but it's an effective tool used at really low rates. I can't really talk about POA without showing this slide or this picture. This is an example of resistance. I don't even remember what I sprayed here, but you can see all the yellow is dead POA, and then you've got these live green plants in there. Obviously, what I sprayed was not effective on these green plants, and so these are going to produce seed, they're going to spread, and that's where we run into our resistance issues. As far as chemicals go, so we're talking about, this is post-emergent use for taking out POA in established ryegrass. Exonerate, Progress, Velocity, they all can be effective. They're all very temperature dependent, really dependent on the stage of the weed, stage of the ryegrass. Those are expensive products, but they do work in certain situations. And then seed head suppression, varying results. Again, it all depends on environmental conditions, but some of the growth regulators, Proxy, Primo, and Cutlass, and there's some more. These are just some of the ones that are most commonly used. All right, so even when you're putting out, when you have ryegrass, that's going to affect your spring pre-emergent, your summer weed plans. So we can't just go out there and apply what we normally would on dormant Bermudagrass. We have to plan accordingly. A lot of growers or a lot of turf managers use Spectacle. Well, Spectacle can't be used on overseeded ryegrass. It's going to smoke your ryegrass out. So some turf managers will use granular products. Ronstar and SureGuard are both two very good products when they're applied correctly. Most turf managers are going to spray those. Well, you can't spray those if you're going to take out your ryegrass. So you can use a granular product. If you can find those on a fertilizer reel, you can spread those. Just be sure that ryegrass is well established before you apply any herbicides. So if you put down ryegrass, it really affects your whole season-long chemical plan, not just your winter plans. Talk about transition for just a minute, and this is kind of a elementary little design that I did, but it kind of expresses what transition is. So this is ideal. We have Bermudagrass. This is dormant. Let's just say this is January right here, and then we go February, March, April, all the way to June. As our Bermudagrass clears up and begins growing, our ryegrass is slowly dying out. Okay, we don't really have a time period here when we don't have any good green grass. All right, if it's a little bit early, then our ryegrass, let's say we see a little bit of green Bermudagrass growing, we think, oh, it's time to spray our ryegrass out, and so we spray it out early April. Ryegrass dies, but our Bermudagrass is slow to green up. Well, we have a time period here where we have really thin Bermudagrass. In terms of Bermudagrass health, that's okay if we our ryegrass out too early, but if we're looking for good planting conditions and good green color, we're not going to have it if we do that. Worst case scenario is right here. We have maybe a spring like we did this past year when it stayed pretty mild up until probably June. And so our ryegrass is really healthy. We didn't spray it out. Bermudagrass starts to green up, and then instead of continuing to green up, it kind of just stalls out because the ryegrass is suppressing it. So it stays right here, and then it gets hot. Ryegrass dies out, and so here we are left with no ryegrass, and very thin Bermuda grass. Okay. A lot of times the temperature is dependent on a natural transition. So sometimes we don't have to do anything. We can just kind of let the temperatures, as they increase, they're going to thin out the ryegrass. We can withhold irrigation. We can kind of scout vertical mow to thin out that ryegrass to let that Bermuda grass jump. And for high maintenance situations, I would recommend chemical transition. So using some of these herbicides here, mostly it's the ALS inhibitors. They're going to slowly melt away that ryegrass. So you just have to time it. You want to make sure that Bermuda grass is starting to green up enough before you decide to pull the trigger on applying some of these herbicides. This is just an example of a bad transition. This was where ryegrass was extremely thick. Once it was sprayed out, we're left with very thin Bermuda grass. And, you know, if this is a situation where you're in a high school football field and nobody's using it during the summer, you know, that's fine. We have all summer to grow that back in. But if you're on a field that's being used, if this is a golf course or something, this is unacceptable. You want to time that a little bit better. And then just cost considerations. I'm not going into detail about any of these because everything's going to be a lot of variables here. But of course, seed, you got the labor to put it down. You got the equipment. If you're on a large scale, you want to invest in some equipment to put it down. Mowing, you know, even for dormant Bermuda grass, you're still going to want to maintain that at some point. So we're not talking about going from zero costs on dormant Bermuda grass. But you got some elevated input costs. And then some alternatives. There's just some pictures of what you could do instead of overseeding. The picture on the left is just a fairway that was painted after the Bermuda grass had gone completely dormant. Picture in the middle is obviously just the process of spraying that. This is very minimalist paint. There are some paints out there. If you get on a good program, to me, it looks just as good or better than ryegrass. But it's very expensive to do that. So this is a minimalist approach to painting. And then the picture on the right is just good, clean, dormant Bermuda grass, which, you know, that's still, you have costs associated with that. You've got to mow it, clean it. You've got to obviously spray it to get the weeds out of it, but that's also a good clean option. And that's it for me. There's my contact information. If I can help y'all with anything, please reach out to me or any of the other agents. And